Hello and welcome to BERNINA Community Studio. I'm Julie Bridgman with BERNINA of America. I'm so happy you're joining us today. Today we are making a professional pillow. This pillow will have piping and an invisible zipper. Also, we will be using the 12C foot, the bulky overlock foot, the zipper foot 4 or 4D, your 1D foot we'll also use, and I'm going to show you the clear 34D foot. Once you go through this lesson and learn how to construct this pillow, you'll be able to make custom pillows on your own in all different sizes. The process is the same, and you can make large floor pillows to long bench pillows and small nursery pillows. And all of these pillows are going to shout professional, not homemade. So here I have the pillow that we'll be making today. And this is about 16 by 16. It has the nice piping on it, and we'll add some buttons. And I wanted to also show you a long bench pillow that I made using the same exact construction. And this one also has piping and a zipper. And I made it the same exact way. So once you get through this lesson, you'll be able to go home and make pillows in all different sizes. Oh, and this one I made because I had a bench at home and I couldn't find a pillow at the store that I wanted, and I was looking for months, and I just decided to make my own. And this is what I made to fit exactly the length of the bench in exactly the fabric that I wanted. So let's get started. Okay, so I am using a Robert Kaufman yarn-dyed Essex linen fabric. Well, actually, it's a cotton linen blend. And this is a medium weight fabric. If you have a fabric that's a lightweight, or you just want a little more body, you can always use Shape Flex product, and this will give a little more body to your fabric for the pillow. But this fabric's a medium weight. I'm happy with the thickness of it. I'm not going to use Shape Flex for this. So you'll start with the back piece, which is a cut 17 by 17. And then for the front piece, you'll have 3 rectangles. The center rectangle is going to be 5 inches by 17. And the other 2 rectangles that will go on either side of the center will be 7 inches by 17. Also, you will have your piping strips, and ideally these will be cut on the bias. You'll want enough piping strips that will go around the perimeter of the pillow, plus about 6 inches. You'll have your invisible zipper. You'll need 3 buttons, and I have wood buttons here. And then you need your cord filler for the piping. So the first thing you want to do is piece together your pillow front. And this, you'll take your 3 rectangular pieces, and all you need to do to start is pin each one lengthwise along these, your centerpiece. And you'll just go ahead and pin that all the way down here. Flip it over and then pin the other side. And I will meet you at the machine. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and piece together our front panel with 1/2 inch seam allowances. Make sure you have your needle stop in the down position. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. I already have that pinned together. for the center panel, you can use the striped fabric. The striped fabric is also Robert Kaufman, or you could use a different color. That fabric line has lots of nice colors, so you don't have to use the striped fabric. So to piece this, go ahead and use whatever foot you feel comfortable with. I am using the BERNINA 1D foot. Once you're done sewing the panels together, then you want to go ahead to your iron and press the seam allowances towards the center. Okay, so now we want to make 3 notches on the pillow front and the pillow back. So the first notch will be at the center on the top side of the pillow. I'm going to use my temporary marker rather than doing notches. I'm folding the pillow front in half, kind of making a crease with my finger, and then I'll go ahead and mark there. I'll do the same for the pillow back. And we're doing this to help with our placement later. Okay. And then go ahead and make 2 notches on the bottom of the pillow front, 2 inches in from each side. So I'm just going to take my ruler, 2 inches there. I guess I could have just used my mat as well, and then do the same for the pillow back. Two inches from each side at the bottom. Okay, in addition to the 3 notches, the 3 on the front panel and then 3 on the back panel, we need to make 3 placement marks for our buttons. So we'll make 1 in the center of the pillow. So the center mark will be 8.5 inches in and about 2.5 inches down, because remember that strip, or I'm sorry, 2 inches. The strip is 4 inches now that it's sewn in. So it's 2 inches is about the center. And then you'll make a mark on either side of that center mark, 3 inches. And that will be where you place your 3 buttons. Another way to make that center mark is you could fold your pillow front, crease it, and then fold it again, crease it. And then where those creases intersect will be your mark. Okay, so now we are going to sew our bias strips together. Ideally, you want to use bias strips for the piping. You don't have to. You can use just the straight grain strips, but I think if you use bias strips, it really helps with the little bumps and creases that might show on the piping, especially around the corners. But I'm going to use 34D foot. This is the clear foot. That's comparable with the 1 reverse pattern foot. The nice thing about this foot is it's you can see through it. It's visible, and then it has these very visible markings, the 3 red markings. So you'll see why once I start sewing. This makes sewing the piping strips so much easier. Also, I am using this diagonal seam tape. The diagonal seam tape has 3 lines. There's the center line, which is red, and the center line is what you will use to line up, well, the red line lines up with the needle. And then there's 2 black lines, which are 1/4 inch from either side of the red line. So on here, you could see where I cut about 4 inches of the tape, put it on the table, and I just made sure that this red line is center with the needle. And then you could kind of see the black marks are going over the 1/4 inch, or the black lines are going over the 1/4 inch marks. And what this does is when you put your strips under here, and I'm going to call this part the valley and this part the mountain. So when you put the valley of the 2 strips together, you want it to be right on this red line. And this mountain also is going to be on this red line. And while you're sewing, all you have to do is make sure those stay centered on that line. And this way you don't have to mark your strip, and it doesn't even have to be exactly at that 45-degree angle. It can be 30 degrees, wherever, as long as you keep that valley and mountain centered on that red line, it will come out perfect every time. And this is a good time to use the freehand system. Okay, so there we go. So you want to make sure, again, you've got 74 inches in length, and then you'll go ahead and cut the seam allowances down to about a 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and then you'll press the seam allowances open. This will help reduce any bulk with the piping. Okay, now we are ready to make our piping. For the piping, you'll need your 12 or 12C foot. I have a 12C foot here, and you'll notice under the sole, the bottom of the sole, there is a groove. This groove is where you will put the piping and feed it through the machine. So I'll go ahead and attach this to my machine. Go ahead and put the thread through the needle slot. And then on my machine screen, I am going to have my settings at a straight stitch at the default of 2.5. And then I will change my needle position to 4 or -4, depending which side your piping's on. So you could, with this foot, have your piping this way, or you could have it the other way. I'm going to keep mine here, and you'll notice I kind of folded this in half, which is why it helps that you have a bias strip. And I'm just tucking this filler into the very center of this fold. So to start, go ahead and place this under that foot in the groove. So the goal is to have that filler cord in the groove, and this is a good place to use your freehand system because the beginning's kind of fiddly just to get it started. Okay, that looks good. And then you're going to use your hand wheel to start to make sure the needle placement looks good. I've got it at -4, so you know that's where you want to be. Go ahead and start stitching. And while you're stitching, you just want to keep tucking this filler and making sure that it's in the center. And then I've got this little wood tool that this kind of helps me keep everything lined up and going. Another thing you can do, if it helps, is you might like better is using a wonder clip. You can go ahead and wonder clip everything. And sometimes I do have to give it a little pull from the back because that filler, this filler is pretty thick. But you do want this really tight because that's what's going to give your pillow a really professional look, is having your piping really tight. So as you're sewing, you want to make sure the fabric doesn't go off anywhere on this side. Sometimes you'll notice your fabric you might start seeing some over here. That's too loose. You want to make sure to get that back tight around the filler. And just keep going until you have all 74 inches done. When you get to the very end though, leave about 4 or 5 inches unstitched. Okay, so now it's time to attach the piping to the pillow front. I'm using Wonder clips. You can certainly use pins, but I find for this part of the project, the Wonder clips work really nice. You want to start by leaving about 3 inches of the binding unclipped, or the piping unclipped. And then as you go around the corners, you'll snip into the seam allowance, but make sure you don't snip into the stitching. So you'll go ahead and just make a few snips into the seam allowance so you get that nice curve at the corner, and then continue using your Wonder clips along the sides. And then once you reach another corner, go ahead and make your snips and get a nice curve. Depending how you want your pillow, if you do more snips, you'll get more of a curve, or we could just do 2 or 3 and have a really sharp corner. The other thing before you start putting in the clips and securing your piping, you might want to check first that you don't have a seam allowance in a corner, because that can get kind of bulky. So here I've reached a corner. I'm going to make some couple of snips, and then I can just kind of mold this into the corner exactly how I want it. And just keep going all the way around the pillow. And then once we get to the end, we'll want to leave a tail at the end so we can join the ends together. Here's my last corner. Okay. Let me put one more in here actually. Now we're just going to leave this tail here for now. It looks like I've got way more than enough, so I will probably end up just unstitching some of this when we get to the machine, and so I can join it to the beginning. So these two will join, and I'm going to go ahead and put this up here. I'll want to stop stitching about 5 or 6 inches before I get to the beginning. So I'll put my last clip right about here. Okay, so we're back at the machine. I'm going to go ahead and get my piping ready to be stitched onto the front panel. I am using a basting stitch. I went ahead and increased the straight stitch length to 5. Also, I'm still using my 12C foot for this part. I want to go ahead and start with about 3 or 4 inches down from the beginning of the piping. And I'm actually going to move my needle position to 4. I had it at -4 because I was sewing on my piping. I was creating my piping with it faced the other way. So now that I have it on the pillow, I will want the needle position at 4. And then go ahead and sew. As you're going around these corners, slow down. Use your freehand system if you need to, just to slightly pivot. And we're just basting this piping on now to the pillow front. And as you go along, just make sure everything is still staying aligned. All the raw edges should be lined up. And then slow down at the corners. Okay, and then as you get towards the end, you want to stop a few inches before you get to the beginning of the piping. Now here you can see we have a lot of extra tail. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 3 fingers length over the beginning piping. So see how I put 3 fingers over that beginning piping? I'll go ahead and place the tail end right aligned with it and cut. So I'm going to cut right here. And then you'll take your seam ripper and you're going to unstitch this part up until you get to close to the foot. Okay, so we're gonna keep unstitching this few inches, and that looks about good. So you just want to unstitch it enough so that you can fold this like so at an angle. Then kind of finger press this. And then before we actually join the ends, we want to cut this excess filler. So I'll go ahead and do that. So you want to just cut this so that it will lay flat and butt up against the beginning part. Now, all you need to do is put it all together by folding it in half. So you have something like this. I'm going to put a clip here so that stays in place while I'm sewing. Get my stiletto. So I'm going to make sure that everything's catching. So you want all the raw edges catching here. Okay, when I get up here, I'll take the clip off and keep going. Do a few back stitches and cut. Okay, so now you have your piping sewn on to the pillow top. Everything looks great. And what you want to do, this is just an extra step that you can do, is press this piping so that it looks as if it was finished. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over, and I'm just going to give it a nice press. And I'm going to do this on all sides and the corners. And what this will do is just give it a really nice extra finish when you're done with the pillow. This, and you turn everything inside out, it just makes the piping really pop. Now it's time to add our invisible zipper. So go ahead and find the bottom side of your front panel, and you do that by checking the marks you made earlier. So on the bottom side, remember the marks were 2 inches from each side. So this is the bottom. Here is my invisible zipper. This is the right side of the zipper. And here's the wrong side. So on the wrong side, you're going to see the zipper. The right side, you are not, hence invisible zipper. What you'll want to do is unzip the zipper, and you'll place this on the raw edges are going to be aligned right sides together. So you can use Wonder Clips, pins, or a 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive, which I'm going to demonstrate. And I am going to put this on the right side of the zipper. Okay. All right. All right, so you just put that all along your zipper tape. Kind of press it a little bit in place. And then you'll press it onto the seam allowance of the piping. Just kind of finger press that in place. And that will hold as you're sewing the zipper into place. All right, so you know you did this right if all the raw edges are aligned with the edge of the zipper tape and you have the right side of the zipper tape is down. So I added my zipper foot 4D, and I selected my straight stitch, and I moved my needle position to -5. We want the stitch to sew as close to the coils as possible without actually hitting the coils. I positioned the foot on top of the tape, and I've just kind of butted up the coils to the foot. And then notice I've got the zipper pull here. So I've just got to try and get as close to that as possible. All right, and then go ahead and sew. You can use a little tool if you need to kind of get this as close as possible. I'm gonna do a little back stitch. And just kind of go slow. I wouldn't go super fast on this part. And that 1/4 inch adhesive tape will keep this all lined up nicely. It'll keep your tape secure, so all you have to do is focus on getting that stitch snug right next to the coil. Now this side has the piping, so it's a little trickier. When we do the back panel, it'll be easier. Okay, so we have one side of the zipper sewed in. So now we need to do the second side. I went ahead and I closed the zipper, and then I added the 1/4 inch adhesive tape. So this is just to make sure you want to close the zipper for a couple reasons. One is so that you want to make sure your zipper tape isn't twisted when you sew it onto the second side. And also, you want to make sure that when this second tape is stitched on to the back side, it's stitched on straight so that when you close your zipper, it's not wonky. So all you have to do is take the bottom side of your back panel and then add it so that your side seams are aligned. And then you finger press this so the raw edge is aligned with the edge of the zipper tape. And then we'll go back to the machine. Okay, so we're back at the machine. And I have the 4D foot on still. I have my machine settings are all the same. I just want to stitch on that second tape to the pillow back. And this side is going to be much easier because we don't have the piping to deal with. And again, as you're sewing, make sure that you're getting those coils right up against the foot, so the stitching line is as close to those coils as possible. And you're going to keep sewing until you get to the very end. You're going to hit the zipper pull. Well, you don't want to hit it, but you're going to get as close to the zipper pull as possible. And notice that I unzipped the zipper when I got back to the machine. It's much easier to sew this on unzipped. And I'm just going to try and get as close to that zipper pull as I can. And then do a few back stitches. So now it's time to sew on the buttons. I went ahead and I put on the button sew on foot number 18. And at my machine screen, I am going to the buttonhole menu, and then you want to select the Sew On Button Program 60. All right, go ahead and, also if you're using larger buttons or heavier buttons, you might want to use some stabilizer on the back. And I went ahead and already did that, and I just secured the stabilizer just with some temporary glue. Now go ahead and find your center mark that you made previously, and you'll want to place your button. Well, actually, before we do that, I like to bring my bobbin thread up. Grab my tweezers, bring the bobbin thread up. Okay. Now I'm going to hold on to the top and the bobbin thread, and then we'll want to line up the two holes on the button so that they are right inside the rubber toes of the number 18 foot. Now my buttons only have the 2 holes. If you have the 4 holes, you want to always sew the front set first, and then you sew the back set. But these are only 2. So if you have a freehand system, this would be a good time to use it too, because then you can kind of just slightly lift the foot and place it exactly where you want it. And then use your freehand or your hand wheel to start, just to make sure you have exactly where you want it so the needle won't hit the button. Okay, that looks good. So I'm going to still hold on to the threads to get started and stitch. All right, and there is the first button. Okay, slide that off the finger. I'm going to cut these tails and go ahead with the second button. I'm going to line this up with my second mark, which again is about 3 inches from the center. Oh, sorry, let me bring up my bobbin thread. And I'm bringing up the bobbin thread because I find that sometimes when I don't do that, the first couple stitches don't always come through. For some reason, it doesn't catch. So I always like to pull the bobbin thread up. All right. Oh, so see how that's hitting a little bit. So go ahead and adjust. There we go. This one doesn't want to cooperate. All right. There we go. All right, now on to our third button. And stitch it on. Okay, and then you've got all three buttons nice and secure. Okay, so I have my pillow front on the pillow back, right sides together. And what I did was I have clipped the bottom corners together. And what I just want to stitch the bottom corners on either side of the zipper right now to secure it in place. I've attached my 12C bulky overlock foot. And, oh, I need to make sure that my feed dogs are up because we had put them down when we sewed on the buttons. And I am going to put my straight stitch length to 3 because we're going through quite a few layers of fabric. So we'll just need a longer stitch. And I am moving the needle position 1 position closer to the piping. So now we're going to be at 3. So this is our last stitch line. And I'm going to position this so that it's right around the stitching line where we had finished sewing on the zipper. So that's kind of a good placement point. So again, line up the piping so that it's under or in this groove of the foot. It's going to be really tight. And when you put your needle down, just use the hand wheel, it's going to look like the needle is slightly going into the piping slightly, and that's fine. Also, I wanted to mention I always sew with the piping, the piece that has the piping on it on top. That's going to give you a nicer finish. So go ahead, do a few stitches, and then do some back stitches, and go ahead and sew around those corners. Now you can use a stiletto because it's hard to, you kind of have to feel where that piping is under there. So if you use a stiletto, that's going to help you know exactly where the piping is and give you a nice tight finish. And then when you go around the corner, just go up, just go around until it's straight, and then do a couple back stitches. And do the exact same thing for the other corner. Here I'm going to start on this side and then sew down towards the zipper. And what we're doing here is just, I mean, if you want, if you're feeling confident, you could just go ahead and clip everything, all sides, and sew all the way around. But what you're doing by just sewing the corners first is making sure that everything is secure, that all sides are lined up so that nothing is wonky or off once you're done stitching everything together. All right, and you want to sew this part again just to about where that zipper stitch is. You might even go over it about 1 inch. And that's going to keep everything lined up. So when you're done with this, you can go back and make sure, lay your pillow flat or the panels flat on a table and make sure all the sides line up nicely. And you can go ahead and look at your center mark. Remember, you made that center mark on the top panel and the back. So line those up and then make sure everything lays flat. make sure there's nothing that looks funny or that's a little skewed, and then go ahead and clip it, and then we'll go back to the machine and sew again. Okay, so I have already pinned the remaining sides or clipped. I'm just going to go ahead and sew all around. Again, I'm using my stiletto to kind of feel for the piping. Make sure that gets in under the groove nicely. All the raw edges are aligned. Now, when you also make note that you want to make sure that your zipper is open halfway. Otherwise, by the time you sew all these sides together, you won't be able to turn your pillow right side out if the zipper is closed. Okay, when you get to the corners, just slow down and use your freehand system. Okay, so we're almost at the end of our stitching here. A few more inches. Okay, so do a few back stitches, cut your threads. And once I get to this part, I want to check my corners to make sure that it's a tight finish. And I want to show you what can happen sometimes, like on this corner. See how it's not quite tight enough. What I'll do is, see, this side looks good. This side just needs to get in a little bit closer. So what I'll do is I'll just go back and stitch over it one more time. It's not that you did anything wrong, it's just tough to get through all of this and see where you're stitching. But it's those the corners that's going to make your pillow look really nice. So we'll try this again and see if that looks better. That looks much better. And you're going to do that for all your corners. So you'll check all your corners, make sure they look nice and tight. And then we are going to trim this excess here. So you want to trim out all this bulk before you turn your pillow right side up. The last step is adding your pillow form. I always like to use a pillow form that's about 1 to 2 inches larger than the actual pillow size. Also, another trick I like to do is to add some stuffing into the corners so that the corners aren't just floppy or flat. If you add this into the corners, then they're nice. You've got some nice pointy corners, and I think it just makes the pillow look so much better. So you just add those in, close your beautiful zipper, and you have your pretty pillow. So if you want to do other pillows, like a bench pillow or a large floor pillow, you would use the same exact process. And then if you wanted to add the buttons, or if you did add the buttons, you can check out an embroidery Bernina Community Studio project I have coming up in another month, where we are going to make panels, a panel for each season, and that we can attach to the buttons. So look out for that. I'm so glad you joined us today. Thank you. And if you want to look for future classes or retreats, check out bernina.com. I hope you all stay safe and happy sewing.